It was over 3 years ago that I reviewed the original 7artisans 7.5mm F2.8 Fisheye lens. This is the Mark II version of that original lens, and I'm going to be reviewing that today. Let's jump in by seeing how it comes packaged. This fisheye lens comes in a small white box. Inside you get a manual and the lens. That is it. The lens has a plastic rear lens cap. Around the front you get a metal friction mount lens cap. Taking a closer look at the lens, first impressions are that it is solid. Made out of metal and glass, the lens weighs a nice 264 grams, which is significant for the size. It looks very similar to the original version of this lens. I had to go back and watch an old review video, but the design is mostly unchanged. At the rear, there is a dark black glossy lens mount that is metal, no electronic connections because this lens is all manual. Here there is a small rear lens element because this lens is designed for APS-C sensors, although if you do use it on a full frame camera, it will give you this weird looking vignetting. This fisheye has a very small aperture ring that moves from f2.8 to f16 in a smooth, short, and declicked rotation. Because of the aperture ring's location being very close to the focus ring, it is easy to accidentally bump your aperture when you are trying to focus, which is unfortunate. Speaking of the focus ring, it is very smooth, well damped, and has hard stops at either end. There is less than 45 degrees of rotation here, but with a fisheye, in most cases, you can focus at infinity and everything 2 meters in front of you and beyond will be in focus anyway. Coming to the front of the lens, there is a permanently fixed metal rose petal lens hood that protects the large protruding front lens element. This is what is responsible for the 190-degree field of view. It's a good-looking compact lens. Inside there are 11 elements in 9 groups and a 7-bladed aperture. As far as improvements, the second generation of this 7artisans lens has a single glass component with a higher refractive index, which just means that it's better glass, and the rear element group is now a Hoya ED optical glass, which should help with chromatic aberration. So I took this lens out with my Sony a6100 and I took a couple of sample photos, and here are the results. None of these are edited or corrected in any way. As expected, this lens gives you a wide GoPro-esque curved edge field of view. It creates a fishbowl effect around the frame, which is why people call these lenses fisheyes. While it is fun to shoot photos at this ultra wide focal length, it does come with some challenges. The first is keeping your fingers out of the shot, and the second is keeping your feet out of the shot. But if you do it right, the results are dramatic. There is a lot of information and detail that gets crammed into the camera's sensor. As for performance, this 7.5mm fisheye is adequately sharp. It looks to be just as sharp as the original, which is good. You can crop in and still create a usable, less distorted image if you desire, and focusing is nice and easy because you really only have to worry about it when your subject is nice and close to you. But I would not recommend it for doing close-up, ultra-wide portrait work because, well, you get the idea. At night, this lens is relatively capable for capturing the night sky. If you look closely, there is a little bit of coma here and there, but I still think it's not a bad performance. This is an f2.8 lens after all. So let's briefly talk about the improvements that 7artisans made in this Mark II version of this lens. And really there is only one improvement, and that is the coatings, the lens elements inside of the actual lens itself. Now, the whole point behind making these improvements or making these changes was to create a lens that produces less chromatic aberration. As you can see here, they did improve chromatic aberration from what I remember from the first generation. It seems to be better controlled than the original. There's less green fringing, and now you just have quite a bit of purple fringing, but it's not as bad as a lot of other lenses that I've tested, not at this focal length, but I've tested far worse performing lenses in terms of chromatic aberration. Flaring is also still an issue with this lens, as it shows up as a huge orange circle around the frame, similar to what happened with the original. So in summary, this 7artisans 7.5mm F2.8 Fisheye Mark II is just barely better than the original. When you look at the build quality and when you look at the performance, there's very little difference between the first generation or this second generation, which leads me to believe that they really didn't spend a whole lot of time over the last 3 years or 3.5 years trying to improve this lens, which is a bit of a disappointment. But if you do like the results that this lens produces, if you like the overall look of having that super ultra wide curved fisheye effect, and you are on a very tight budget and you don't mind spending $139 on a fun to use fisheye lens, it is still a good lens to pick up and add to your collection. Do I wish it was more vastly improved over the original? Absolutely, but it's still not a bad lens. After all, the original was a good lens as well, and this is just ever so slightly tweaked in a positive direction. So if you are interested in reading more about this lens or checking out links or purchasing it, check those out down in the description below. As always, thank you guys so much for all of your comments, all of your likes, and your support. Stay tuned for more videos, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.